Welcome to another Somerford Associates Podcast. My name is Bill Balfour, Cybersecurity Strategy Advisor at Somerford Associates. Today's podcast is a customer case study, and joining me is Dawes from Specsavers, who is the ITSM Platform Manager for Service Performance. Let's begin. Well, Graham, thank you very much for taking time out in your busy schedule. So for the audience that are around that are listening today, can you just describe your role within Specsavers and a bit more about Specsavers for those of us that don't know?
So yes, Specsavers is a household name in the UK, so I should think most people listening will recognise the name. But what you might not know is we operate globally. So we are number one in countries like Australia. We've recently expanded into Canada, and we do more than just sell glasses. So we do domiciliary, which is eye test in your home or outside of the store. We also sell hearing aids in our audiology department, and we do enhanced optical services. That's kind of medical grade. Medical stuff on your eyes. That's our New Medica subsidiary that looks after that. But we don't just sell the glasses, we manufacture them. So Specsavers has got several manufacturing sites globally. We glaze the glasses and we distribute that to the shop. So it's real end-to-end that we own. And we've also got back office functions. So traditional back office functions, things like HR, IT, finance, things like that. It's quite a large company, probably 3,000 to 5,000 in the back office, and up to 30,000 to 40,000 out in all our stores globally. So my particular role at Specsavers is ITSM Platform Manager. That's a fancy title, and it basically means I look after a number of the tools used by our global operations team. Things like things used for automation and monitoring, of which Splunk is one of them, which is why we're here today. I've been at Specsavers for coming on, I think it's 12 years, just gone actually. Been in various roles, and I've moved into my latest role, the platform manager role, about 2 years ago. But I've been around Splunk since it was introduced to Specsavers, which I think is about 5 years ago now. Wasn't responsible for the introduction, but was there at the early days. So I've seen how it's grown throughout that time.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much for your intro there, Graham. That's much appreciated. So, as you mentioned, I think for my notes, the relationship between Specsavers and Somerford kind of goes back to mid 2019. So that's 4 or 5 years ago almost now.
Yeah.
So how did how did Specsavers kind of realize that they needed some sort of service intelligence for the kind of platforms and the service management components, and what actually drew them towards Splunk?
So it originally started looking for something to help analyze and aggregate all our logs, really, probably how most people started. We didn't know at that stage about things like ITSI. It was more, we had lots of different monitoring tools for things like availability and service health and stuff like that. But we didn't have anything with logs. We didn't pull logs in centrally or anything like that. So we joined up with the InfoSec team, who obviously look through logs for security events and things like that. And Splunk was selected to start aggregating the logs across mainly the UK to begin with, but we are now global in terms of how it's used.
Cool. So it's more of like it was a collaboration with another function within Specsavers, and then it was kind of like looking at trying to consolidate the tool sets and the information that was coming in.
Definitely. So yes, because there's a lot of overlap. It's the same logs really that our operations teams are looking at, that the InfoSec guys are looking at. So there's a lot of overlap on there. We didn't want to ingest things twice. One tool for InfoSec and one tool for us. It made sense just to have all of that aggregated in one place. It's over time that we've introduced or started making use of the other services within Splunk. So to get those logs in, we ended up deploying agents everywhere across all our servers. But the agent can do a lot more than just ingest logs. It can run scripts to query a database or something like that. But it can also, through the TAs that you can get from Splunk base, you can start putting in metrics from those devices. So CPU usage, memory usage, all things like that. So from what started as that's just pulling logs, we quickly saw as the product developed, and some of it was there from day one, we just didn't use it. We could start we start using Splunk to replace other tools that we had, so other legacy monitoring tools. Splunk could do that out of the box, so why pay twice for them?
Yeah, definitely. It's everybody's been penny pinching at the moment, especially with the current economic climate. So, so you mentioned out of the box. So, are you predominantly an out of the box functionality, or is there like a 50-50 split with like customization, or have you just kind of tried to keep it simple?
We try and keep it as simple as much as possible, but it's not always possible because a lot of our legacy systems are custom, and you can't just download something from Splunk base to go and start interrogating something that we've developed internally within Specsavers. But for products like ITSI that we've now heavily moved to use, so we're monitoring all of our services through ITSI. We have had to customize some of that through the help of Somerford. So for context, we now use a Splunk ITSI for all of our 24/7 monitoring across the estate. It's across the whole of the UK and our Northern Europe territory, and we've recently onboarded the Australia, so we're starting to migrate them into all of their infrastructure into ITSI as well. And how we're doing that is the customizations we've needed are things around availability monitoring. So ITSI is very good for data that's constantly variable. So if imagine a CPU data is the easy one. You're constantly getting a flow of data that's giving you a value, and that value changes every 30 seconds or whatever interval you're collecting at. Really good for that. But because we wanted all of our RTSI monitoring to cover everything, service up or down, things that are on or off, kind of binary answers, we've had to customize slightly to use the KPI features. I know there's other means for it, but other approaches you could take. But what we've tried to do is use things like deep dives and the service trees to display everything we're monitoring about a service. So we'd like to see that KPI view, even if it's just showing a 1 or 0 for server on or off. That's the customization we've done.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned there about like getting that sort of kind of overview of your kind of services or your service processes. So what would be your kind of typical incident response? How would you use Splunk to maybe kind of assist you in kind of getting to the root cause?
So we use the alert and episode screen for all of our alerting, and then that will integrate with other tools like ServiceNow to create an incident. But how we've done it is each service that we've mapped, we haven't mapped our whole estate yet, although all the infrastructure's in, it's not necessarily grouped as services yet. There'll be a number of KPIs within that, and it could be a business KPI around orders flowing into a particular manufacturing site, down to the health of the infrastructure that's underneath it. We tier it as business, application, and then kind of infrastructure layer. So all of our trees have the same 3 or 4 lanes in them. And within each service, there'll be a number of KPIs that we can turn on or off for alerting. So there might be some KPIs that we're not interested in alerted on. They add context around an incident. So we've been able to use the tagging feature with an ITSI to, when we want to alert off something, we tag it with OpsBridge. That's our NOC, but it basically means if it's got an OpsBridge tag, alert into the OpsBridge, and that's the episode screen. And by turning that on, that will create an alert into the episode screen. The OpsBridge can pick that up, resolve it within there, or escalate through the connection to ServiceNow if needed.
Okay, so you've got that kind of that integration to the external ITSM tool called ServiceNow, which is
yes,
which most organizations, large organizations, have these days. Those kind of those service management tooling, but that's great. That's great to hear. So I think probably a bit of a tricky question is that we know Splunk is not cheap, yeah,
yep.
And we know that sometimes actually justifying it to the leadership team or the senior management team, was there any drive to get quick wins from the Splunk solution, or was it just let's embed it and let's kind of organically grow?
So we've done probably 2 or 3 renewals since we've been with Splunk, and it's getting harder. So initially we had quite a small Splunk instance. We were only probably ingesting about 50 gig of logs, tiny really. But through that initial use case that we deployed, just aggregating logs and then using it to monitor infrastructure, it was an easy sell because we only needed a small amount of license, but we could decommission other tools that meant the grand total was less than having Splunk and that other tool operating at the same time. So the first few renewals quite straightforward. We could show we could use Splunk to decommission our legacy infrastructure, and in some cases, some of our APM tools that we were using, so that it was cost neutral. As more people are using Splunk and come up with more use cases, obviously that demand is growing on it. So it's kind of gone beyond the being cost neutral in terms of being able to remove other things to then adding more features, more functionality, ingesting more data onto it. During the COVID times, actually, we had a renewal then, but we were, whether you say it's fortunate or not, but we had a real big focus on our supply chain sites on there, because it was a good opportunity to get monitoring fully across them. And through the work we were doing, I haven't got the figures in front of me now, but we saw an immediate impact on a reduction on major incident time. So because we had our ITSI and our deep dives all defined, when an MI hit, you could quickly load up a deep dive. You could see what led to that. You could see what the cause of it was, which is something we hadn't had before. So that helped sell expanding our license that time.
Yeah. I think that also helps you in your day job, because I'm assuming that at the end of the month you're the one that's in the hot seat giving your updates on the service performance KPIs to leadership. So having those kind of deep dives, those quick reaction to from alerting and analytics, kind of helps you to deliver that message back to the leadership team.
So on the first, so on the second renewal, so the larger one we did, we could show that we were reducing major incident duration, and in some cases, not globally across the board, but in some cases we actually were removing incidents. We were preventing those MIs from happening in the first place, purely because we had all the logs now coming in. We had business level KPIs defined. We had all the infrastructure KPIs. We were monitoring a lot more. We were starting to prevent things from going wrong in the first place, which is an easy sell. It's quite areas such as manufacturing. You can quite quickly get if you have 1 minute outage, it costs this amount of money. It's quite easy to do that. So by having the figures to show the reduction in P1s and the reduction of duration of them, it's quite easy to relate to money straight away, and that speaks for itself. As that's matured, there's only so much we can kind of grab in that space now. We're starting to expand into other areas. The renewals are getting harder, but I think at the moment we can still make a business case for them. Helps to have a bit of competition as well internally. We have a few other tools that I'm sure Splunk would love us to get rid of. So whilst we've got them, they're still competitive on pricing.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's always worth having that in your back pocket. I agree.
Yeah.
So we just talked about ITSI. However, I believe you're now looking at going down the OLI route, observability.
Yes, yeah. So a lot of our ITSI will be used with the OLI suite, and it's all the stuff we've done to date really has been kind of traditional IT infrastructure. You've got a database server, an application server, and some network resources. You can physically touch them in most cases. We are an Azure first house. Everything we develop internally is done in Azure, unless they don't have the functionality, but they in most cases they do. So it's the type of resources that you can't install a UF on. It'll be PaaS services. There'll be a SQL, a PaaS service on this. You can't physically install an agent on there. There'll be function apps that again are just pieces of code running that you can't install agents on. That type of service and infrastructure doesn't really lend itself to UFs and the kind of traditional Splunk world, which is when we started with a trial of the Splunk Observability Suite. I think SignalFX is it when we first saw it, and that allows us to pull all from the Azure APIs and metrics and things like that. We can put in so much information that we just couldn't do that easily before. And it also produces all the graphs for you as well straight away. So traditional Splunk, you normally, unless you can find an app that's been developed, you usually have to develop your own graphs. The observability suite does all of that for you. You pick a metric that you want to plot, and it will plot it without much knowledge.
Okay, so are you looking to utilize, the application performance monitoring,
Yes,
or even RUM as well? Yep,
definitely. So that's the big sell recently, and that's was our biggest addition to our latest renewal. So we're developing our patient management system. It's going to be a cloud first system. It doesn't look anything like what we use today. In store, it's there's a physical server in every store running an instance of our patient management system. We are moving to a centralized version. That, as you can imagine, is a very, very critical piece of software for running Specsavers. We've deployed APM all over it. So APM is in all of our staging environments, and will be in production. And that allows, the developers love it. I keep asking them for tangible reasons why they love it, but they just seem to love it, because it allows them to focus really quickly on where the problem is. And the biggest thing that helped sell it, when we did the POC with Splunk, I can't remember when it was now, probably 18 months ago, it took about a couple of hours for one of the devs to instrument the code. And within minutes of them spinning up that environment and just letting some data go through it, we got a red line appear. It was like, okay, what's that red line? And they didn't know. And that was probably the best answer we could have had, really. They didn't know. And when they looked into it, they said that would have taken us days, weeks, months to find. We might have had to wait for someone to log an incident to say that this particular service is slow, and it pulled out, put the red line on, and by drilling down into that red line, they could see the line of code, and I think it was related to some SQL query or something in the background. It could show you exactly what part of that query was causing it to go slow, and they said that would have been finding a needle in a haystack. And after that, we've kind of deployed APM across all the dev environments, and it's massively helping with the quality that they're producing. And we particularly pushed quite hard to get it in the dev environments before we're anywhere near production, because if we can trap all of those issues while they're going through their testing cycles and performance testing, they should never get into pod. And in theory, you could say we shouldn't need that software in pod because we've detected all the issues before we get there. But I think we all know there'll probably be something that hits us in pod, so we'll put it there as well.
There always is, but that's key to actually identify the issues early, isn't it? It's
yes.
It makes your job easier. It makes you sleep at night, hopefully a lot easier. But before we go, I just wanted to kind of cover off, and I'd be remiss of me to kind of not masking it. So how has Somerford assisted you on the journey with Splunk?
So Somerford have been there since the beginning. They massively helped with our ITSI deployment. So when we first bought Splunk and started using it, we had no internal knowledge, we had no training or anything like that. Somerford helped us fill that gap. As we had initial use cases, they developed the dashboards, they developed ITSI for us, allowing us to kind of learn off of Somerford, but as well as upskilling through the Splunk training academy and everything. So they massively helped us get value quite quickly on some very specific use cases. Network monitoring and Meraki was one of them. But over the years, they've helped develop our ITSI instance as well. So we have now specialist internal. We've invested heavily in training and everything. But the Somerford guys always, they're probably just that one step ahead in terms of knowing what the tool can do and the knowledge to implement it. So Somerford has helped develop our kind of alerting mechanism. So the customizations we had around more binary KPIs and things like that, they've put a easily repeatable customization in for that is really simple for us to template and use across all of our services and maintain. And they've also helped massively on the SIEM. So they helped implement various security use cases and develop that area. And they also provide augmented support, is what it's called. But we've now moved. We don't have specific use cases so much nowadays to give to Somerford. It's more having the backup of someone with deep Splunk knowledge and technical skills that we can call on as and when we need it. So for the augmented support, we get a couple of days a week of a Somerford resource that can help either just perform health checks for us, or we can just say, look, we've got this user story that's come in, can you just go and develop it? And they can get that done in super quick time for us.
Fantastic, Graham. That's good to hear that Somerford's actually providing some value add there for you. Great. Thank you very much for your time. I think we can probably wrap this up, unless there's anything else you wanted to highlight briefly. If not, just for say thank you very much. I know you're a busy man, and good luck with the Ollie, and kind of getting that into production, into a state that you're comfortable with, obviously with Somerford help. And I really do thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
That is it for this podcast. I would like to thank Graham for taking the time to talk to us today. If you would like to see our extensive library of podcasts covering a large number of Somerford partners, please check out our YouTube channel or visit www.somerfordassociates.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the usual social media platforms. Thank you for listening.